I don't think I've ever seen baseball fans quite as united, quite as quite agreeing with each other as much as I saw on social media the day that Angel Hernandez was fired, and I'm so glad I never have to watch him ump another game of baseball. Hello, I'm Colin,
And I'm Charlie.
and welcome to the C&C Talks podcast, episode 17 of season 3. And Charlie, our first normal episode in a while. Last week we did a special episode on the Trump conviction, so we will touch on that a little bit here in this episode. But if you want our full thoughts on that, then go back and listen to last week's special episode, available everywhere that you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, but we do have some updates on what happened in that Trump trial. So, Colin, what have we learned since then?
Yes, since then, I believe we touched on this a little bit last week, but the sentencing for this trial will be on July 11th, just a couple days before the Republican National Convention. Now, what could Trump be sentenced to? That's something that's also been in the discussion. Could it be jail time? I'll put it this way. No one else would ever be convicted of 34 felony counts and not be sentenced to jail time. Does that mean that Trump will get jail time? I don't know. We will see. Some other options. House arrest is an option that would, I think, definitely be logistically less complicated because the president does need some level of protection from the Secret Service if he's in prison, such as Rikers Island. Now, Republicans are freaking out about the conditions of Rikers Island, which is, as far as I can tell, the first time that any Republican has actually cared about the conditions inside a prison is when their guy is all of a sudden going to be sent there. He could be sentenced to some amount of community service, some amount of fines. In all likelihood, it'll be some combination of those various penalties, and then he will appeal it. Now, what we have also learned recently, though, is that in Georgia, that case has been paused temporarily by an appeals court while they make a final decision on whether Fani Willis can continue to prosecute that case. So pretrial motions can't go ahead, and another delay, which is another win for Trump, making it less likely that he'll be tried in this racketeering case before the election. The Supreme Court, meanwhile, continuing to stall on the immunity decision. They heard the case about a month and a half ago. They still have not made a ruling. They just announced some decisions Thursday morning. Those were not among the decisions that were announced. So, some good news for Trump elsewhere, but at the same time, once again, Donald Trump is a convicted felon, and there are lots of things that go with that. Polling shows him doing somewhat worse. In addition, New York has revoked his license to own a gun. It sounds like he will be able to vote in Florida in November, but he also cannot travel internationally to a lot of countries. Biden just went to Normandy to celebrate the 80th anniversary of D-Day, which more on that later on in the show, but Donald Trump could not take that trip at the moment. So his life is obviously inconvenienced, and it's at least some level of accountability at last, even though, again, the wheels of justice have turned very, very slowly.
Yeah, and I do want to get to the point that you made about that other case of his, the racketeering trial, being delayed, and that's interesting because it seems like more and more that the case that he was just convicted in could be the only one before the election, which would be a big win for him as it prevents him from being convicted it further.
Yeah, I will say that is my full expectation. I highly doubt that he'll be convicted of anything else before the election, which means if he is elected president, it's unlikely that he will ever be convicted of those things. Also, I would argue this is the case that is kind of the least obvious. The other cases are significantly stronger and arguably significantly more important because they have more to do with trying to overthrow the results of a free and fair election, or as in with the Florida one, the mishandling classified documents, which I would argue that both of those are more important than this one in New York. Not to say that this one in New York wasn't important; it helped influence the 2016 election, but still not, I don't think, comparable to the others, which will not see trial for some time.
All right, let's move on now to the UK scheduling the general elections to take place on the 4th of July. Colin, what do you think about that date as their selection?
Uh, I don't know if they were thinking about that. It's kind of funny that they decided to schedule it on the 4th of July. I don't really think they were thinking about it too hard. Charlie, this actually kind of surprised me because after the dreadful results from the Tories in the local elections a few weeks ago, I actually kind of thought that they were going to delay it even further until like November or December. They have to hold it before sometime in mid-January. But I guess their thinking here is that their standing is only going to get worse, not better. So, yeah, Parliament has been dissolved. We're now in, I guess, the pre-election period in the UK, and Labour polling significantly ahead of the Tories. The Tories, Charlie, I do believe are polling second. The Liberal Democrats are behind them, as well as Scottish National, all the other smaller parties.
Yeah, and yeah, you do make an interesting point. I agree with you that they are just scheduling this when they are, just so they don't lose even further. But yeah, this year is going to be remembered as a very bad one for conservatives in Britain.
One that could possibly set them back decades because I fully expect them to just get absolutely shellacked in July.
All right, moving on now to another party that's likely going to get absolutely obliterated in the elections, the Libertarians. They've had their convention. Who's their nominee?
It doesn't really matter who their nominee is because they're only going to get a couple percent. But what I found really interesting about the Libertarian Convention, Charlie, you know who their keynote speaker was?
Who?
Donald Trump. It was
Huh.
Donald Trump, which a couple things about that. First of all, he was booed relentlessly at the convention. He said essentially the
I did hear about
Libertarians
that
should
actually.
nominate him. Yeah, they should nominate him. And then if they don't, then they can just keep on getting their 3% every 4 years, which is really kind of an asinine thing to say at someone else's convention. We saw his people try to kick members of the Libertarian Party out of the convention and fill it with his people so that he would get a warm response. And then the Trump wing was mad when the people there, they didn't let the MAGA people in. Yeah, because it's not the MAGA convention, it's the Libertarian convention. So yeah, I think it was damaging to Donald Trump to get booed. He really cares about people think of him, and that is a humiliating thing for him. But really, the bigger concern for me is that why is Donald Trump speaking at the Libertarian Convention? Right? Why is that something that the Libertarian leadership decided to do? Because they're running, at least in theory, their own candidate in the 2024 election. Somebody that's running against Donald Trump. He's an opponent to Donald Trump. Not a major one, not one that anyone takes seriously, but still an opponent. So if they're a serious political party, which we already know that they're not, but if they were, they would not be inviting that guy to speak to them. So that makes no sense, especially since Trump's policy is not traditional libertarian values whatsoever. Although we have seen the Libertarian Party shift in a lot of ways. We've seen leadership now call for the assassination of Biden, which has been a delight to listen to. But
So hang on, wait a
it
minute.
really
You're telling
confuses
me
me.
you're telling me that the Libertarians did something stupid? Whoa, I did
Yeah,
not expect that.
yeah, their party isn't. Do they have a coherent platform? I don't even know. It's
I don't think so.
yeah. All right. Moving on to more accountability, which is really just, I think, going to be a constant theme throughout this episode, both in the politics and the sports section. You'll see what we mean. It's just people who have done bad things uh, finally facing accountability for those actions. Republicans have been charged with election interference in Wisconsin. This includes Ken Cheesebro, the guy who's been charged in Arizona and Georgia as well, pled guilty to the charges in Georgia. So he's now pled guilty in one state under indictment in two others for the same sorts of crimes involving fake electors. And he is definitely the highest ranking Trumpy that was indicted, but it's all from the same sort of plot. Like Donald Trump was involved. He was a co-conspirator, was not indicted. I don't know if he was named as like an unindicted co-conspirator, but that's all where it comes back to. And we'll see, because we also believe that there's some sort of federal investigation in Wisconsin into the fake electors as well, though that hasn't been confirmed. So it could Donald Trump be in legal trouble in Wisconsin? That's possible.
All right, let's move on now to Samuel Alito. What's he in the news for this week? If it's the flag this week, if it's the flag last week or a couple weeks ago, is this an update on that, or has he done something else?
Yeah, it's an update on the flag controversy. We've heard that there's been multiple flags found at multiple homes, which really means that the neighborly dispute isn't a reasonable excuse. So, what's the big update here? It's that he has now declined to recuse himself from January 6th cases. But he already previously had before this story broke, but now that we heard the story, there's thoughts, well, if he was actually going to do the right thing, which again, we've already seen him time and time again not do, but if he was going to do the right thing, then he would recuse himself from these cases. But no, he's continuing to blame it on his wife and say that he won't recuse himself because he respects wife's right and ability to make her own decisions, Charlie. This, again, coming from the guy who wrote the opinion overturning Roe v. Wade. Ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, something there isn't quite adding up.
No, I mean, it's very typical Samuel Alito that stuff doesn't add up because he, at the end of the day, is a hack, and a hack that was appointed by a president who lost the popular vote, which, as I've said over and over again on this podcast, is one of many, many reasons why Americans' trust in the Supreme Court is at an all-time low.
Yeah, no, that is very true, and people like Samuel Alito who are doing actions like this really are not helping. The entire point of reclusing yourself is if there is a case in which you believe that your opinion is affected by other matters outside of the case, or you already have an opinion on it that will affect your decision, you should not be a part of that decision.
Exactly, and we know he knows how to recuse himself. He did it. There was a decision Thursday morning that dropped that he had recused himself from. It was unanimous anyway, but he knows how to recuse himself. He just won't do it in this case because he cares so deeply about the outcome and knows that he has the ability to influence it. Let's move on to something, Charlie, that I did not think I would be talking about, but Twitter has now allowed pornography. Like, it is explicitly legal now on Twitter, or X, which I guess at this point is definitely the more fitting name for it.
Now the name is better.
It finally works as a name, right? My big concern about this, besides, everything, is that under Twitter / X, or whatever you want to call it, under their terms of service, people under the age of 18 can use it. You can use it as young as age 13.
We use it.
Yeah, so are you now just going to be showing minors pornography? Because let me tell you, that's a pretty big crime, right? If minors want to go onto a site that is explicitly a porn site, or even not explicitly a porn site, and essentially lie about their age, say that they're over 18, the site really no longer has liability there because they've at least checked to make sure that if they have pornographic content on their site, that their users are over 18. They've gotten rid of their liability. Twitter, though, by now allowing this, again, previously they didn't have liability on this, even though it was a big problem because it wasn't allowed, but since they weren't able to get rid of all of the porn bots, they've now just given up and said, yeah, it's allowed. Because it's allowed, and because they allow people under the age of 18, it would seem to me, again, I'm not a lawyer, but it would seem to me that they have full liability here, and that's a pretty serious crime to be showing minors porn.
Yeah, no, it very much is. All right, let's move on now to let's get to some more serious crimes. Steve Bannon and Alex Jones.
Yeah, again,
Steve Bannon's
I
going to
told you at the
prison,
beginning of
and
the show.
Alex Jones is being forced to liquidate his assets because he said something stupid. What's going on with that, Colin?
Yeah, I said at the beginning of the show, right? There's a lot of people who are finally facing accountability for their actions. This is good. Steve Bannon, this is the contempt of Congress, refused to testify to the January 6th committee. He was convicted of contempt of Congress. He appealed it. It did not work. He's sentenced to 4 months in prison. He has now been ordered to report to prison by July 1st, which means If he reports there, he'll be out by November 1st. He can't record War Room in prison, so that's a pretty important thing to especially during an election season that he won't be able to do. So we'll see who picks up that slack for him. Actually, it's probably bad for Steve Bannon to go to prison because I hear that they mandate showers there, and that does not seem like something Steve Bannon's done in a while.
All right, what about Alex Jones?
Yeah, so you might remember Alex Jones was forced to pay $1.5 billion to the families of Sandy Hook um, kids who died in the Sandy Hook shooting for defamation, for essentially saying that the parents were paid actors. He was forced to pay $1.5 billion. He has not yet paid a cent of that because supposedly he does not have the money to pay that. Now, he has a lot of money. There's no chance he has $1.5 billion. Let's just start there. But he is now being forced to liquidate significant assets to give to the Sandy Hook family. So this will still not give them all of the money that they are owed, but it will give them a lot of it. This includes eventually he's going to have to sell InfoWars, which is a pretty big deal, Charlie, for him to no longer have control over InfoWars, the platform that he has used to spread so many lies, including these lies about these Sandy Hook families. So very bad for Alex Jones, which is another good day for America.
Yeah, no, it really is. Your point about people receiving the consequences for the actions they've done is really true, and we're going to get to more of that when we talk about the sports section. Just also in the news as of recording this, it is the 80th anniversary of D-Day, when American, British, and Canadian forces stormed the beaches of Normandy to liberate Europe from the Nazis. Again, taking accountability. But Biden was in France to have a meeting with Macron and also to honor this 80th anniversary, and he really put emphasis on defending Ukraine from some of the threats to our modern world and modern democracy, like Russia. He emphasized the
Yeah.
need to protect Ukraine and to not give in to powers like Russia.
Yeah, I believe he also said in the speech he talked about the importance of alliances during World War II and hoped that that importance was not lost on the American people today. This comes at a time, of course, when NATO is being questioned by many Republicans as to whether it is worth it for the U.S., chief among them Donald Trump, who, of course, is close with Vladimir Putin. So, Charlie, as really our resident history buff here, what are your thoughts on this 80th anniversary of a hugely consequential day?
Yeah, I think this just it's amazing to think how long ago that was, but still how it affects us today. Mainly because if D-Day hadn't been successful or it had been pushed back, then we would likely be looking at a much stronger Soviet push and more Soviet control over Europe, potentially Italy, potentially Germany, and those two powers being certainly weaker due to the effects of people like Stalin and his iron grasp on the Eastern Bloc and the Soviet Union going into the 50s. And really, I think we would see Germany would be quite a bit weaker, and I think the Soviet position in the East would be quite a bit stronger. And I don't think NATO would nearly go as far as East as it has today. And I think the world would be a lot less safe for democracies as it is today.
Yeah. I mean, I think that given that it's the 80th anniversary, I'll take a slightly different track than you did. You were obviously talking about the historical impact. I'll go with taking a look at the soldiers, the really the bravery of all of the soldiers who fought really in World War II in general, absolutely brutal war, but especially in D-Day, just the courage that they had and really everything that they did to risk their future so that we could all have one, really sacrifice their freedom so that everybody now, so that I can live in a free country and that everybody else can live in a free country. And I think that that's something that we cannot lose sight of all the people who have done so much so that we as a country can be where we are right now.
Yeah, that is very true. Let's move on to the stat of the week this week. The Boston Celtics find themselves in the NBA Finals yet again. They're tied
Yes,
with
they
the
do.
Lakers. They are tied for the Lakers with the most NBA championships at 17. But my question to you is, can you name the last 5 finals opponents that they faced, including this year?
5 for each of them.
No, 5 for Boston.
Just for Boston. Okay.
Yeah,
I
Dallas hasn't made it. Dallas has only made it to 3 finals: 06, 2011, and this year.
Yeah. Okay. So, Dallas obviously.
Yep.
Golden State 2 years ago.
Yep. You're
And
happy
then
about the
before
result of
that,
that one.
yes, I definitely am. Before that, I don't think they had been to the finals since they played the Lakers, right?
In 2010, yep.
And 2009, right?
And 2008.
Oh, and
Yep.
2008. Okay. So that's
That's
4,
5.
and then
That's 4, yeah.
what was the year of the other one? This might give it away, but just give me
87.
the year. They hadn't been to a finals before that since 87?
Nope.
I knew, okay, I do not know.
It was the Lakers. It was the last Lakers Celtics battle in the
Okay,
finals.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, they made
Obviously a huge storied rivalry between those two
yeah,
squads.
they made 4 straight finals, 3 of them against the Lakers, 1 in 86 against Houston.
Yeah, and as we move on to sports, speaking of 86 finals, we should take a minute to commemorate Bill Walton, who died of cancer. Just obviously all-time great basketball player. Injuries really hurt him in the NBA, obviously, though an all-time great
Huge
college
hero in the city
basketball
of
player.
Portland.
Yeah, and then of course we just can't forget his life outside of basketball, whether that's broadcasting college basketball, which he just did with absolute joy. Obviously, he wasn't for everybody, but personally, I thought that it was just so much fun to listen to him on a broadcast in kind of a sick way. It was almost kind of fitting that that when he did pass, it was the day after the Pac-12 played their final game. Obviously, probably the biggest hero champion of the Conference of Champions that we have ever seen, and he never had to live his life without it. So, Bill Walton, just the joy he lived his life with, just a great life that we cannot forget.
Yeah, just one more thing to add about that. Did you know that he's in Ghostbusters, the movie?
I did not know that he was in Ghostbusters, but that sounds exactly like the type of
He's an
thing Bill
extra.
Walton would be
He's in
in.
the background for about 3 seconds of one of the last scenes in the movie.
Huh. Yeah, no, it does sound like Bill Walton, and I also think it's just a testament to how great of a guy he was that you can't find anybody saying a bad thing about Bill Walton after his death. Like seriously, there's just none there. So rest in peace too. Just an absolute legend. Now, you might think we would be starting with the NBA Finals or the Stanley Cup Finals, but Charlie, that's not where we're going to really kick off our sports section today. We're going to start in Major League Baseball with more accountability for being absolutely terrible at your job. The news that we have awaited for a long, long time. Major League Baseball has fired Angel Hernandez.
Is he going to sue them now?
I think that they gave him like a substantial buyout that he really didn't earn. I mean, he's already tried suing them numerous times, and this is what's crazy about Angel Hernandez, right? Everyone knows that he's terrible at his job. It doesn't take much to notice that. And sure, lots of umpires are terrible at their job, but Angel Hernandez was uniquely bad, and he was really the poster boy for terrible umpiring. And when he sued the league repeatedly for not giving him World Series assignments, for not letting him be a crew chief because allegedly he was Cuban, they quite literally countered in court and won their lawsuits by saying, that's not why, it's because you're terrible at your job. And they still let him work for several years. And let's be completely honest. Angel Hernandez was not fired because he was bad at his job. Otherwise, they'd have to fire 90% of umpires. Umpiring is a disgrace in Major League Baseball at the moment, the way that they're currently doing things. He was fired because he's the face of bad umpiring. He is continuously being brutally mocked on social media. And that's something that Major League Baseball just can't have. It takes away from the legitimacy of umpires, of the game of baseball, to have someone like him be a constant topic of discussion for just how bad he is at his job. So they really did not have a choice other than to let him go. They're going to say they didn't fire him, but really that is what happened. And thank God, I don't think I've ever seen baseball fans quite as united, quite as quite agreeing with each other as much as I saw on social media the day that Angel Hernandez was fired. And I'm so glad I never have to watch him ump another game of baseball.
Yeah, same here. And we got some more other MLB news out of San Diego. What happened over there?
Yeah, so Charlie, you remember Jonte Porter of the Toronto Raptors was suspended for life, banned for life for gambling on his own team's games. Yes?
I assume it happened
And
again this time in the MLB.
yeah, we told you at the time that the problem wasn't what was going to happen here. It's what was going to happen when it happened again, because inevitably it was. It hasn't happened again in the NBA yet, or at least they haven't
That we
ended up
know
having
of.
to suspend someone for life. But in the MLB, Tucupita Marcano now suspended for life, with several others suspended a year for gambling. Marcano was betting on his own team's games. Now, Charlie, interesting thing about Marcano is that he was a terrible gambler. He bet, I think it was nearly $100,000 just on MLB games. I think it was like $150,000 on baseball games in general. He won roughly 4.3% of his bets.
Man, jeez.
I feel like it's hard to be that bad, but I think he was on the Pirates, and I think he was betting on the Pirates for a while, so you can kind of understand. Yeah, I mean, the only worst thing he could do is bet on the White Sox recently. Um, honestly, he was probably doing that too.
Yeah, Colin,
White
by the
Sox
way,
have lost 13 straight as of recording.
I was considering
sorry, 14 straight.
I was considering making another stat about the Red Sox, about the White Sox run differential, but I've done it, I
Yeah.
think, 3 times already. So I'll wait till later in the year.
Yeah, it's really, really sad how bad the White Sox are. So, once again, though, sports leagues have some decisions to make because they are continuing to prop up sports gambling because it gets them more and more money. They're putting a team Vegas in a couple years, in theory, especially since we now know that the A's apparently want to play something like 10% of their games outside of Vegas at a neutral site, which MLB doesn't seem to like.
As I said, just bring them
they
up
keep on
there.
yeah, no, they keep on embracing gambling, but then when the inevitable happens, right, like no one's shocked by this, and I mean, like, can you blame the players? I mean, I guess you can, but it's such a double standard.
It really is. Shall we talk about the controversies in the WNBA?
I think that is a good place to go to next. Yeah, Charlie, why don't you intro this one?
Yeah, let's start with the Caitlin Clark incident. Playing against Chicago, there was a really hard foul, and Angel Reese was seen clapping after that had happened. Colin, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is obviously a very, very sensitive issue, and I think in a lot of ways it's because there is such a racial factor to the Caitlin Clark Angel Reese thing. There was in college basketball. There definitely still is now in the WNBA. But I will say this. Yes, it was a foul. Yes, it was an egregious foul. I was shocked that they didn't call it a flagrant at the time. I'm glad they reversed it. It seems like a very obvious, flagrant foul. There is not a place for plays like that in the WNBA or the NBA or any sports league, right? At the same time, we don't need to baby her, right? Just because she's the face of the league now doesn't mean that we have to be going like, oh, no, how could you be doing this to like the person that's propping up your sport? Like, I mean, come on, give me a break. That's how the league works. The trash talk and physicality are part of healthy competition. You see it in every other sports league. Why should the WNBA be different? Why should we expect them to all just get along with each other? And here's the thing. Yes, Caitlin Clark is the face of the WNBA right now. I'll get into that more in a sec, but it's also completely understandable that veterans are going to feel jealous that she's getting this much attention because they are better than her. All these veterans, these all-star players. Caitlin Clark she's been good, but she has undeniably struggled in her first few weeks in the WNBA. It's not unexpected, but she has struggled. And yet, she's the one that's getting all the attention. So it is perfectly understandable for all these veterans to feel jealous of that, even though, because they've been there helping grow the game for years, being really good players, and they've just not gotten the attention, and now she comes in and gets all that attention. So that is understandable. Now, a player did make a comment that, how she's just a shooter. I mean, look, that's wrong, and sure, that's trash talk, and the player that said it isn't a particularly good player. She's bounced around, but again, this is healthy for a sports league like this, right? This helps build a good rivalry between the Sky and the Fever, who are already nearby. And I'm sure that if this was the NBA, right, we could do a rant about this just like we would about Dylan Brooks or about Patrick Beverly, right? Trash talk
Yeah.
is good. It's fun. So that is an important thing. Now, this is where I think things have gotten away, though. Angel Reese has made comments about how she's also a big part of the rise in popularity of the WNBA. Look, I love Angel Reese. I love to watch her play. Great basketball player. All that. Yeah. She on this though she is wrong. She has played a small part. Well, but are people watching the Chicago Sky games? Not really. Only when they're playing the Indiana Fever. Caitlin Clark is what's bringing the eyeballs to the WNBA, right? So it's not Angel Reese. It's not the veterans. It's not Cameron Brink. It's not Camila Cardoso. It's Caitlin Clark. Now, Joy Taylor of FS1 also said, like, well, Caitlin Clark wasn't really well known until she played Angel Reese in that title game, and Angel Reese beat her a couple of years ago. And the only reason Caitlin Clark is popular, therefore, is because she's white or whatever. That is just not true. I had quite literally never heard of Angel Reese until the Final Four that year, the year that she ended up playing Iowa and Caitlin Clark and beating them for the national championship. I had quite literally never heard of her. I had heard of Caitlin Clark over a year before, so seriously, just cut that part out. Caitlin Clark is responsible for the rise in popularity. Then the other one is about really how women's sports are covered in general, because I feel like we just can't be normal about this. And Stephen A. Smith made some really ill-advised comments on this show, and really gross ones, talking to Monica McNutt on First Take. Essentially, he talked about how he had been propping up women's sports for years, and McNutt was like, respectfully, Stephen A., you could have been doing this a lot earlier, and he thought that was super unfair. Well, here's the thing. He has talked about women's sports. Give him a little credit for that, but here's the simple fact of the matter. Him talking about women's sports has not been what's boosted women's sports. He has talked about women's sports because it has gained popularity and because he now knows it's going to bring in ratings. That's quite literally the only reason. And then he also had the audacity afterwards to go say that essentially all of the females that are on First Take, Monica McNutt, Andrea Carter, Shanae Ogwumike, all of them only have their careers because of him. Completely disregarding all of the work that they put in to get there, all of the talent that they have. No, apparently, according to him, the only reason that they're where they are is because he did them a favor by letting them on his show. So it's really quite gross, Charlie, and I think there's so many better ways to cover this whole thing.
Yeah, that's certainly a take of his.
Yeah, not a good one.
I very much disagree with that. And I think your point of him discussing women's sports because they have gained popularity is very true. Let's move on now.
Yeah, I mean, he still won't talk about baseball or hockey. Why? Because not enough people are going to watch that. It's literally only because people want to hear about Caitlin Clark. People want to hear about women's sports. That's why he talks about it.
Guys, you'll never guess what happened to the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of women in professional sports and professional broadcasting, a big shout out to Doris Burke, who just made history today when she was an analyst on Game 1 of the NBA Finals, becoming the first woman to call a major sports championship on TV. So some real history right there. She has, regardless of whether you think that she's a good announcer or not, she has absolutely earned her way to that spot. So congratulations to her. And now, Charlie, I think it's time that we move on to the NBA playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, both these conference finals were not particularly close. Halliburton went down for Indiana. That really ended that series. And Minnesota just used too much against Denver. Dallas finished them off pretty easily. So, two pretty boring series.
Well, I'd say, there wasn't, by the time the game threes were over, we all knew who would win each series. But I will say, most of the games in both of these series were actually pretty tight games. Like Indiana blew what? 3 leads in the last 3 minutes or so?
Yeah, that first
Like
game was painful.
that was really, really painful for Indiana. And so were
Honestly,
games, I believe it was
my
3
thought
and
on this
4.
is once they lost game 1, the series was over.
It
That was
really
their one
felt that
shot.
way. And they did it in such a stupid way too, right? It I hate more than anyone else fouling up 3 in that situation. I hate it because it makes the game boring. However, it is 90% of the time the right thing to do. And they should have done it there. There's not an especially big downside.
But they
So,
didn't, and here we
do it.
are.
Game 1 of the NBA Finals, though, Charlie, your reaction to that?
I'm not going to overreact or anything, but this is why Boston brought in Kristaps in the offseason. He's a great player. He was underused in Washington, and he just cooked Dallas in game 1. It's in Boston. I thought they'd win. I thought they'd win game 1, and I think they're gonna win game 3. I still think Dallas in 6 or 7. I think the real decider will be, does Boston win game 2, and does Boston win game 4? If they're up 3-0, I think the series is over. Boston's just going to finish it off in 4, maybe 5. But I
Sure.
think they struggle in game 2. They lost against a Jimmy Butler-less Miami Heat, and they struggled in game 2 against Cleveland. Game 2 in Indiana was slightly different, but this Dallas team has some fight in them. I think if they can win game 2, come back, steal home court advantage, come back to Dallas, tied at 1, I think the series is very different. I think game 2 is really pivotal. That's on Sunday, I believe.
Yes, correct, Sunday. And this episode will be out likely Saturday morning.
So I think by Monday we'll know quite a bit more about the series. I think if Boston goes back to Dallas up 2-0, I think they're likely going to win. If it's 1-1 going into game 3, I have to give it to Dallas probably in 7. But
Okay.
we'll see. It comes down to Sunday.
Yeah. I'm going to overreact a little bit here. We've had essentially a week off from basketball, which gave the NBA media so much time to do their own overreacting and really to kind of build anticipation for the series. Say, oh no, actually Dallas might have a chance. No, even though Porzingis is back, right? Even though Boston was far and away the best team in the regular season, really all season long, they were just the best team in the NBA, very obviously, and Dallas wasn't. And Dallas struggled with some only okay teams in the playoffs, such as the Clippers. Right? Like, maybe actually Dallas can win this game. Maybe it'll even be in 5 or 6. Or win the series, maybe even in 5 or 6. And then Boston comes out in game 1, says, yeah, we heard all of that, and no, just no. We are the best team in the NBA. We're going to win a title this year. For me, this series is over, Charlie. Like, I hate to say it, I badly want a quality NBA Finals. I don't think this is the year we're getting it. I really don't. Like, maybe Dallas can steal a game, but 1 or maybe 2. I don't see this going 7. I see Boston winning this in 5 or 6.
Well, see, Colin, my issue, I understand where you're coming from, but my issue with that is after game 1, I thought that Dallas wasn't going to beat the Clippers. I didn't think they were going to beat the Thunder. I didn't think that they were going to beat Minnesota. Every time that it looks like they're finally done, that the run that they're on was all for naught, and that they just got lucky, they come out of nowhere. Luka and Kyrie pull something together, and they get some huge games from PJ Washington, from Daniel Gafford. This is why I say we cannot overreact with this Dallas team. Give them 2 or 3 games, and we'll see. If they're down 3-0,
No.
series is over. If they're up 2-1, I think you have a chance. And even game 3, if they're down 2-0, but game 2 was even close, then I think they have a chance. I don't think game 1 doesn't really tell me anything. Boston is at home. They're pretty average at home, but they're on their home floor. Game 1, Brown and Tatum both had great games. I mean, you expect them to win at home. So, I think we hold off any overreactions until game 2.
I mean, I hear you, but here's the problem, right? You mentioned, oh no, we thought that they were done early against the Clippers and against the Thunder. This is an entirely different caliber of team that they're playing, and they showed why. This is really the first time this postseason that Dallas has just gotten like completely smacked. Like they've had blowout losses, but none that felt just as bad as this one. Boston never even let them get in the game. They started to come back in the third quarter, and then Boston was just like, yeah, about that. No, it's not happening. And sure, Luka's and Kyrie are great. Luka, I would argue, is the best player on the floor in the finals, and it's one of the best backcourt duos of all time. And they have a little bit of depth, but if you compare it to the depth of Boston, first of all, it's not like Boston's top two stars are nothing. No, they are great players, and then their depth around them is tremendous, especially with what I saw out of Kristaps Porzingis in Game 1, especially in that first quarter. Like, that is such a crucial piece. I thought they could win the series without him, but now with him back, I don't even think it's close.
Hey, Colin, I'll tell you this. Game 1, Dallas OKC. OKC won 117 to 95. Very similar margin to Game 1 here. I said the series was over. It looked like they were outmatched. OKC was at home. They dominated for almost the entirety of the second half. Dallas got close in the third quarter and then got completely destroyed in the fourth. And you know who won that series in 6?
Dallas did, but they were also playing a completely inexperienced team. Boston's been here before several times recently.
Yeah, but as I said to you a couple days ago, I just cannot trust Boston until they win. When they do win, I will admit they were a good team. They got the job done. But this team is infamous for losing leads, collapsing down the stretch of series. Like think about to a couple of years ago. I mean, like they are great at having series go on too long. They get a couple injuries, and then everything falls apart.
Okay, I hear that. I will also remind you that their last run to the NBA Finals, they faced 2 Game 7s, right? They were not the team that they were here in this run.
Colin,
they've never faced a challenge. I get that they've been playing just less good competition, but they've earned the right to that path too.
Okay, how about Game 1 of 2022? Boston won by 18 against the Warriors.
You don't need to remind me.
Yes. No, I do, because the Warriors came back and won the series. This is a great example of, as I said, of Boston falling apart after winning. And guess what? They went on the road, which is harder.
Yeah, you can say it was by 18, but also it was a close game that the Warriors led by like 12 going into the fourth quarter. It was due to a Warriors collapse. So I said after Game 1, Boston's not winning this series. Now, part of that was just my bias as a Warriors fan, but even still, like, it still didn't feel like that was Boston's series at that point.
Yeah, I just cannot count Dallas out. Every time I count them out, they prove me wrong. And until they don't, I'm going to stick with them. As I said, I think after Game 2, we'll know a lot more about how these two teams are going to match up, but I just wouldn't overreact yet. Let's move on to we've been talking about basketball.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you wrong.
Let's move on to hockey.
Stanley Cup Finals getting set to
Canada's
start Saturday evening. Yeah, I know, and that is dangerous. I think I have to root for Florida, unfortunately, just because I'm an American and I'm proud of that.
I don't want to, but I think we have to.
Yeah, it was a pair of actually decent series. Panthers defeating the Rangers and the Oilers defeating the Stars, both in 6. I'm really looking forward to the Stanley Cup Finals. Charlie, Connor McDavid, obviously a big star. We saw what happened Florida with the improbable run to the finals last year, only to just get crushed by the Vegas Golden Knights. So this should be a fun series.
Yep, I really think it will be. Who do you have in this one?
I have Florida. But here's a question for you that I think we've kind of talked a little bit about just without a recording going, which is if a team from Canada was to win a Stanley Cup, because eventually one of them's going to, right? It's inevitable that at some point it'll happen. Who do you want that team to be? Like, who would you be okay with from Canada winning a Stanley Cup?
All right, so immediately I have to say that it can't be Vancouver.
Obviously.
We're from Seattle. We cannot let the Canucks win.
Correct.
I know you have beef with Toronto.
Yeah, I just
Uh,
have beef with the city in general, and also the Maple Leafs sucking is one of the funniest annual bits, so I can't root for them ever.
I mean, Calgary's in our division. So is Edmonton, I believe.
Yeah.
So I gotta say, some probably Ottawa.
Yeah, Ottawa, maybe Winnipeg,
But okay,
probably not Montreal.
but both teams being both teams named the Jets being awful is funny.
But it's also funny that the Winnipeg Jets, score more in the playoffs than the New York Jets do.
Yeah, and if yeah, I like them being in the playoffs but not winning anything. Just to make it funnier that the New York Jets haven't been back since 2010.
Yeah.
I think it would
Ottawa's probably the right pick.
yeah, I think it would be very nice if the Jets continued to be bad enough that they break the Mariners streak for longest playoff drought of all time, of the
Of all
21.
time. Yeah, is it the current longest drought in professional American sports?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Unless the Angels have a longer one, but I don't think they do.
Yeah. All right. Here's a fun one for you, Charlie. An American team has won the Grey Cup. It's the CFL championship more recently than a Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup.
Hey, there's American teams in the CFL.
I don't think there are anymore. I might
Who
be wrong.
who was it?
I don't even know. I don't follow Canadian football.
Also, that is awful.
It's really sad.
All right,
And I'm
let's.
looking at now. No, speaking though, real quick of American teams winning stuff that they really shouldn't be winning.
Oh,
Um,
we're talking about
okay, the
cricket.
U.S. just upset Pakistan in the Cricket World Cup.
See, this is
Pakistan is a power in cricket, and the U.S. can. Is there 10 people in the U.S. who know what cricket is?
maybe.
It's especially funny too that it happened in a week where cricket Twitter decided to start beef with baseball Twitter, talking about how cricket is just a much more impressive game.
Oh,
It's really
nice.
funny that that week it's
The American
the
showed
U.S.
up.
decides to beat them.
Nice. Let's talk about some more. Let's go back to the NBA now. We got some news about the TV rights. This is big for possible expansion as well.
Yeah, so the NBA has not yet put pen to paper on their new TV deals, but it's looking really likely that their primary new TV deal is going to be with Disney, so ABC and ESPN. Likely fewer games than in the past, but they'll still retain their rights to the NBA Finals. Looks like that B package, instead of being with TNT, it's probably going to go to NBC, and then there will be a third package for Amazon for the national rights deals. This likely means the end of Inside the NBA in at least at TNT. It's unclear if that those guys could go to Amazon or to NBC. It seems unlikely
Well,
at
that's a
this time.
huge
It's also
loss.
still it's a huge loss for the NBA. At the same time, it's also still possible that TNT retains their rights if, say, they might have matching rights. There's some controversy over that, and that might get litigated as to whether they're able to just match the rights of another network once pen is put to paper. Also, they could be trying to work on like a fourth, smaller national TV package. So there's lots of options, but really TNT, at least recently, has been the standard bearer when it comes to covering the NBA, not just with their Inside the NBA crew, but really their entire production, the music, especially after ESPN got rid of their iconic finals theme for whatever the hell it is they have now. Their play-by-play guys, phenomenal over at TNT with Kevin
Honestly,
Harlan and
I
Abel
like
Brian
the
Anderson.
new one. The old one's obviously better, but I don't mind the new one.
It doesn't fit. It's not like iconic. Like I think that part of it is just like the history behind the like iconic theme. Like it's just so epic and like right for the moments that they use it in too, I think. Like it's
I
not a
agree.
bad piece of music, the new one that they currently use. I just don't think it works that well as a broadcast theme.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. So the Lakers are back in the news. They're pushing for to sign UConn coach Dan Hurley. This is interesting because we thought a couple days ago that JJ Redick was the number one option. So that has since changed.
Yeah, Hurley would be a tremendous hire. Obviously, it would be wild to have him leaving UConn. It would be the national champion in football and basketball would both be losing their head coach at the end of the end of the season. UConn obviously has won two in a row and arguably the favorite to win another next year. Dan Hurley just really talented at putting together teams tactically. Like his teams are just continuously good. Obviously, it's very different being an NBA coach, but it feels like a job that he could do. Would he be a fit on a team with LeBron? Uh, I don't know, but we also don't even know that LeBron's going to be on the Lakers next year, remember? That's still kind of up in the air. So I think it would be a good hire for the Lakers, though. If they can manage to make the money work, I think that they'd be foolish not to do this.
Yeah, I heard some people saying that the Lakers should just have a coach, but
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
think
sorry.
that's going to work.
No. Although, would JJ Redick not just be that?
I mean, kind of, but not really. But also, the era of the player manager ended about 80 years ago.
Yeah, and LeBron really tries to bring it back, but that's not something he's really been especially good at throughout his career.
Also,
So,
but just looking back at LeBron's career, considering he's probably going to go wherever Bronny goes.
is Bronny going to be drafted this year? Like, is that a lock?
Well, I wanted to share an idea with you. I think he's going to go where his son goes. So, and if you think back about the teams that LeBron has had rivalries with, given the teams he plays on, the Boston Celtics could do something very funny.
Oh, sure. That would actually be really funny.
And also,
but
LeBron in a Celtics jersey is right up there with Kobe in a Clippers jersey for the worst thing I've ever seen.
yeah, so I think everyone keeps mocking Bronny to the Lakers, and I'm curious if the Lakers would just draft him just to keep LeBron happy. I don't know. It's
So
he does not feel like on his own merit. I don't think he's an NBA caliber player yet. I think he needs at least one more year in college, but he has no interest in doing that.
I agree. I think the issue with that, though, is if he does another year in college, I mean, I don't know how much LeBron's going to have left. Then again,
I mean, LeBron's not getting younger.
Then again, we said that about him about 3 years ago, and he's still scoring more than ever.
Yeah, like let's not pretend that LeBron is like quickly fading. He's still among the best players in the league.
You gotta think he's got to fall off at some point, but he just
Yes, and
hasn't.
also I think what you have to forget too is just the toll it takes on you just to get his body in shape every year. Like he has to put in more and more work every year. It's not going to get any likely a point where he's like, I don't want to do. So that could be coming soon too.
Yeah. All right. Let's go. Let's
Because
move on.
he's not going to want to play. He's not going to want to play if he's not at the top of his game.
Yeah, I agree.
He's going to continue to put himself in the best shape that he possibly can. But yeah, European soccer, Charlie, UEFA Champions League is won by Real Madrid again. And guess what? They're getting Mbappe.
Can we please stop them? Please?
I wish. I really, really wish we could.
I'm happy to say though that England did nothing again, as usual.
Hey, don't worry. There's always the European Championship to look forward to starting next week. And I've heard they just lost on penalty kicks. I'm sorry, Charlie.
Well, oh well. See you again in 4 years.
Yep. I will. When the World Cup comes here, I am going to try to go to a knockout stage game of England just to watch their penalty kick collapse.
Gee, man, you
They're
have some beef, man.
Oh no, I just enjoy the tragedy that is them losing by penalty kicks every year. It's funny is what it is. I don't have anything against England. It's just that it's funny. It's the same reason that I like to see the Jets lose and the Maple Leafs and the Angels.
All right, let's move on now to the Formula 1 Monaco Grand Prix, the crown jewel in the Formula 1 calendar. Just a quick question for you.
Here's a weird one.
Just give me a quick question. Last year's race at Vegas had 87 overtakes in it. How many do you think Monaco had?
It had very few, didn't it? Like, didn't the top 10 finish in order?
The first time ever, the top 10 finished in the same order. The correct answer was 5.
Yeah, that's very few.
I fell asleep halfway through the race, and I missed 1 overtake. But the big news,
wasn't it at 6 a.m.?
Yes.
Like, I would fall asleep too.
I've woken up at 4 to watch races. But anyway.
Oh, I know you have.
The big story, the two big stories anyway from this week, are that Perez has a huge crash with both Haas cars. He was only down there because he had gotten knocked out in Q1. He qualified 17th of 20, and Verstappen did not have a great weekend. He finished in 6th. Charles Leclerc finally wins his home race. He had a couple of races where he didn't start because of issues. He got screwed over in the pits a couple times, but he's finally done it. The Monegasque wins his home Grand Prix for the first time, and this is really the year of breaking the curse. Lando Norris finally got his first win after 14 podiums. Leclerc wins at Monaco, so maybe we can have a championship fight. Red Bull's advantage at the top is narrowing; it's under 50 points. His lead in the drivers is only 31. We're getting good here, and the race at Canada this weekend is not a historically good track for Red Bull. We do also have some contract news. Sergio Perez, despite having a couple of disastrous races at both Imola and Monaco, has been re-signed for next year and the first year of the new regulations in 2026. And Esteban Ocon, after crashing into his teammate, Pierre Gasly, in Monaco, has announced that he will not be returning to the team. They have agreed to, quote, mutually part ways. No, Alpine fired him because he's an absolute menace. We're at Canada this weekend before we head to Barcelona in a couple weeks and end the month out in Austria, which I believe is also a sprint race. That's it for me. Let's get back to some more interesting
Charlie,
things, according to Colin.
Well, I will say that Perez crash, it looked awful. Like, it's honestly amazing that he was okay after that.
Yeah, and that's really
and the shape I was in.
Yeah, the amount of strides that have been taken in the sport to reduce driver injury is incredible. The Halo, the Hans device, it is just incredible the amount of innovation that has taken place. But the big news about that crash is that's about $3 million worth of damage for them to fix. And that is really bad for them. That's going to really affect their development and possibly cost them some upgrades coming into the end of this year, which, if they're in a tight title fight, may really hurt them.
Yeah, I will also say, Charlie, you kind of touched on the various aspects of it, but that first lap was one of the more chaotic things I've ever seen.
Oh, you want chaos? Watch the just some advice. Just to anyone listening to this, and to you, Colin, watch the first lap of the 2022 British Grand Prix. Just some advice.
Is it worse? Because what happened this time, there were kind of three main things, right? The Alpine drivers crashed, the Haas drivers got suspended, and there was a Sainz thing too, was there not?
Yeah, Sainz locked up and went wide, almost hit the wall. Colin, if you want a couple of race starts to watch, 2022 Great Britain is good, 1998 Belgium is good, and so is 2002 Australia.
Yeah, I'll let you also talk about one of your favorite races, the Indy 500, which started late due to weather, but ended up being an incredibly close finish.
Yeah, ton of great overtaking, as usual. Lead switch back and forth. Kyle Larson trying to run the double, both NASCAR at the Coke 600 and the Indy 500, did not end up going his way due to the rain. He actually ended up having to stay in Indy, which did not allow him to compete in the race at Charlotte, which actually temporarily removed him from the NASCAR playoffs, as NASCAR has a stipulation that you have to race every race or at least attempt every race of the season, unless you get a waiver from NASCAR, which he has now received. But Joseph Newgarden wins for Penske, back-to-back wins for him. He won last year. Not quite as close as last year. There was a huge crash on the final laps last year. This year, not so much. But yeah, just again, a great race. IndyCar is a great series. If you have not watched it, I so recommend it. And as for that Coca-Cola 600, the end of the greatest week in racing also had some severe delays with rain and a pretty big controversy. Actually, Christopher Bell was in the lead as the rain came down, and it really seemed that the track was starting to dry when the race was called. In fact, the drivers didn't really know that it was called for a while afterwards, but so there was a lot of controversy around it. Did NASCAR call it? Did Fox call it? Did the broadcasters decide collaborate with NASCAR to end the race? Just a really weird affair. And the other race that we missed in between that was the race at Gateway last year, this past weekend, at Worldwide Technology Center just outside of St. Louis. And it's a really interesting race. It's a very flat oval. And that was won by Austin Cindric in a surprise. He beat Brian Blaney to the line. That locks him in for the playoffs. just as we're about to reach pretty much the halfway point of this season.
All right, and then a couple more things. Oklahoma has won another Women's College Softball World Series.
They cannot be stopped.
Now 4 in a row. They were down 5-2 in an elimination game to Florida on Tuesday. Came back, walked that game off. Then in the championship series, beat Texas 2-0 in a Red River rivalry for the championship. Both those schools now off to the SEC. Obviously, College Baseball World Series coming up in a couple weeks, but Oklahoma once again on top in the Women's College World Series, and I guess every expectation that they could be again next year. And then we'll end with tennis as we are nearing the end of the French Open. Rafael Nadal, it feels like a long time ago at this point, but he did start this tournament, lost in the first round for the first time ever. He still has almost a 97% winning percentage at this tournament. He's won the event 14 times, which is truly unbelievable, but eliminated in the first round to Alexander Zverev, the guy who is currently facing trial for domestic abuse. He's now, though, through to the semifinals, could be through to the finals with the win over Casper Ruud, the, I believe, 2-time finalist now at the event the last 2 years. And then Friday, also there will be just a blockbuster match, Carlos Alcaraz and Yannick Sinner, as Djokovic had to withdraw from the tournament with an injury. He's undergone surgery. Unclear when he'll be able to play again. So that really opens up the field somewhat, but it was already unclear given Djokovic's tough year if he would be able to win this thing. Alcaraz has been great. Sinner has had a particularly good year. And then on the women's side, perhaps no surprise, Iga Swiatek once again through to the finals. Swiatek, I believe, only lost one set. She beat Coco Gauff in the semifinals in straight sets. It really was not a tough match. She had a 40-minute match. The only set she lost was to Naomi Osaka in the second round. Really looked like Osaka could beat her for a while, was up a break in the third set. So there's been some great stuff going on in France. Really looking forward to seeing who can win this tournament.
Yeah, and Colin, just one last thing to lead you out on. The former Arizona Coyotes, now Utah hockey team, had their 6 finalists for their team name, that being the Blizzard, the Utah Hockey Club, the Utah Mammoth, the Utah Outlaws, the Utah Venom, or the Utah Yeti. What's your pick?
So you can't go with the Utah Hockey Club. It's just bad. I'm sorry. And I don't like the Utah Outlaws. Really, I think I'd be okay with any of the other 4. Like, they're not like, oh wow, this one really sticks out. But they're all like, yeah, they're fine names.
Yeah, my thing is, I think Blizzard is a bit too close to Avalanche, also considering geographical location.
That is true.
I like Outlaws, if I'm being honest. I think it works. I still think their name should have been the Utah Storm and Mormons, but close enough.
That would be something. All right, well, we will agree to disagree on the name of the new Utah hockey franchise, but that's going to do it for this episode of C&C Talks. Make sure that you subscribe. We have episodes coming out every single week wherever you listen to your podcast. You can visit our website, cctalks.com, where you can learn everything you need to know about the show. And you can call us with your questions at 360-389-2630. Again, that's 360-389-2630. And you can follow us on Twitter at CC Talks Podcast and follow Charlie at CC Talks Charlie. And you can join our Discord server at cctalks.com/Discord. All this information and more is in the description below. Thanks so much for listening. For our producer, Morris, and our production designer, Zack, I'm Colin.
I'm Charlie, and we'll see you next week.